Fourth wind.
Yep, fourth wind. I'm on my fourth wind. I got my fifth ready to go. What's that? What's the latest controversy? What have you guys been doing on Wednesday night? I haven't been able to see any of that. Is there anything crazy going on there?
Fumbling around.
Fumbling
Hey,
around.
Rich.
Yeah.
Before we get started, when you get an opportunity, give me a call. I'm putting together a surprise for that fella that's next to you right there. You see the gentleman right there?
Yeah.
Mr. Jackson Snyder?
I don't need any surprises.
Oh, you'll be fine.
I don't know if his heart can take a surprise.
I don't like surprises.
Well, I'm going to take care of you. I want to talk to you about it if you don't mind.
Okay.
Sometime this week.
Unless you got money.
You're terrible.
He doesn't want us spending money. He just wants us to give him the money.
That's right.
Okay, Wednesday nights. What are you guys doing? Is it good, Jackson? What's going on?
Oh, we need to ask Allison about that. She's the main purveyor of that information.
Oh no, not me. I'm just the the comic filler at the end. Jackson's got it all mapped out.
I'm fumbling around.
What is this about comic relief? What?
Oh, I just throw in my my sort of amateur digging at the end just to fill up the end of the hour.
But your book review, the book that
I think that was a very good book review.
Well, it wasn't actually, guys, I hate to break your bubble. I was reading that guy's own words,
but you put it in a way, and let me take this moment to say, look, you've grown a lot in this stuff. And so you did a very good job in putting the guy's words, bringing the guy's words to life. So I thoroughly enjoyed it from both ends.
Well, thank you.
I enjoyed Jackson's part. I'd like you to show those things again, Jackson, if you get a chance to. Do you remember what where you were showing the synagogue and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I
can't remember my past studies in this. I guess I'm going to have to go back and listen to my podcasts.
Listen to that again. At the beginning of the teaching on Wednesday, you showed some pictures. And in those pictures, one of them was a synagogue. And it showed how it's set up now and how it had the baptismal there, the mikveh.
Yeah, you're talking about Panhazi's tomb?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Man, it was hard to find those pictures. I looked all over the place.
But that was very cool.
Yeah, it was.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't think I'd ever seen those before. Those were really neat. I wouldn't mind seeing that series of photos again if you can remember what all of them are.
There's a page with the photos on it. One page. I can go back and find that page. I think I bookmarked it. But, of course, they don't, in these websites, they don't link religion to archaeology.
Oh.
So you've just got to dig around. And one of the things I found there was the excavation report from 1906 of the Panhazi tomb and the other Amarna tombs, which is a very interesting. I haven't read it yet. I just read parts of it. But, of course, you've got to read in the religion part of it. And, of course, that's what we're trying to do anyway.
Well, if you could get a chance to put those up, your descriptions of the Panhazi tomb and the things in there was very good. And that helps people like me and Governor, because I can actually envision that stuff when you describe it.
Really? I should do a better job of that then. Yeah, okay.
To life.
I never thought about that, and I wondered how you're able to see those pictures in the first place.
Well, if the descriptions are good, then it's just as good for us as seeing them. If if they're not, or if there were just pictures flashed up there and no one described anything, then we would kind of be hanging out to dry.
Oh, we got it now.
Yep.
But I think that the ones that you did on Wednesday night, they were very good, very descriptive, and it helped a lot.
Yeah, we're doing good, but we're fumbling around too. We're trying to come up with a cogent theory of the Akhenaten and Hebrews conjunction. And we've had 4 sessions of this now, actually. So those are up at Podbean, on my site at Podbean. I think that's the only place I put them, though. And I'm really struggling with it. I'm going to have to listen to my past stuff to remember.
Why don't we just, have you ever thought about maybe if you don't feel that you have a cogent direction on it, why don't you extend it maybe a week or 2, take a week off, extend it, and draw a conclusion and form a direction and just go there?
Because I'm supposed to be the facilitator. This is supposed to be something everybody is doing and studying and adding their portion to every time we come together, but that's not the way it's been.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Well, I added my little 2 cents in there what I could, and the only thing I could do is the stuff that we talk about, the what I saw with my hands when I visited the King Tutankhamun exhibit in Fort Lauderdale, and that's a lot. You think about that, the fact that they would let you get your hands on artifacts like that and touch them and handle them, and those things come to life, like you said.
Yes, I can hardly believe that you had that opportunity. That was a real privilege.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I got a chance to see all of that stuff, and also, I don't know if I told you, but there's a museum in Jacksonville, Florida, that has this. It was not the Middle East stuff. It's archaeological stuff like dinosaurs and things of that nature, where they take you and they'll put you up on a lift, so you'll know what a T-Rex, the size of a T-Rex. They put you in a, oh my gosh, what was that thing, Gov, that I wrote on when I went to see?
Like a bucket, in a bucket lift or something.
Yes, like exactly. So they put you in a bucket lift and you go up, you start at the head and you examine the skull, then they move the bucket down the body, and then you, of course, at the base, you look at the tail and everything like that, the feet and everything. But by the time you're done, you really have a full visual of what a dinosaur looked like. You're like, wow, that thing could have ate me.
Yeah. You would have made a tasty tidbit.
Literal, because those things are so they have, I think they have programs like that all over the country where you can actually examine with your hands the artifacts, and artifacts that they sometimes do not let the general public touch. You have to see it.
Right. What's on our plate today, Rich?
Well, we have a couple of different things. I've been going over some crazy stuff, so I can't get into all that. But one thing that it's led me to be thinking about is the idea of religion in general. And I wanted to kind of just discuss and first maybe hear what different people thought about religion. And the question being, would the original instructions from the Father to the children of Israel, would that have been considered religion by today's standards? And if so, why? And if not, what would the differences have been? And I don't know if any of you guys have ever thought along these lines or not, but has anybody ever thought along these lines, or is this something new to everybody?
I thought of it often. And I've actually, if you want to expand that, I've actually, since I've been delving into really making it my business to understand the first century assembly, our Messianic forefathers, I ask that question often now. The things that they were doing, would that be considered a religion? Or is it something that we've done?
Jackson?
I missed the question, but I got an idea what you're talking about. I had to take a Lasix break.
Okay. Yeah, I was just asking, would the original instructions from the Father to the children of Israel been considered a religion as we know it today, or was it something completely different, devoid of religion?
Well, there's a religious aspect to it, certainly. There's a creed to it. The components of what a religion is are there, but it's far more than that. It's a lifestyle. It's a philosophy. It is a community. And as you know, I've done a lot of study into the first century groups and the first century BC as well, trying to determine what they actually did, what they believed, and what they are. And I would say that what they believed is far less like a religion than what we believe. I don't think us so much, but common religious people believe, because there may be some community to that, but there's no lifestyle really. These people were in a different economy altogether, to the point where the Messiah called it his kingdom. There's lore there, there's mythology there, there's texts of all kinds, and they're not always, they're often contradictory. And so,
yes.
Yet they were, by these people, they were still accepted by the whole, whether they were contradictory or not. There was a more liberal outlook in text-wise, manuscript-wise, but a far less liberal outlook in behavior and lifestyle.
Yes, I think it is interesting that he called his what he was doing the kingdom. And the idea that I would think is that the only thing I can think of that makes it religious in our sense is the fact that there is a creator, an Elohim, the Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, a lot of it seems to be a social construct and civil rules. And what I mean by that is there's no, in the original, and I know people would disagree with me on this, but I don't see that, the current form that we have as one cohesive unit. I see it as about 5 or 6 different pieces, maybe more, that got sewn together. And so I think that trying to find that original would be very helpful to us.
Are you familiar with Max Weber?
No, I'm not.
Sociologist?
No.
He delved into this a lot. He's 20th century, but he long past. But he's one of the main characters that we study in school of sociology.
How do you say spell his name?
Weber, Max Weber. And he was he contradicted the normal idea of sociology. He was a conflict sociologist, so you get a completely different perspective on what we consider sociology today. In fact, right now, Weber is still the main course of study in secular sociology. And you can take Weberism and you can extend it out and end up with Marxism.
Sure.
But I guess you could do that with any of it. The schools, the universities today are really extending it out to a socialism that's a Marxism rather than a religious or consecrated socialism, which I wanted to also mention that word kingdom is an artificial word anyway. Did they have kings at that time, such as we would consider kings? When we think of kings, we think of England, or we think of old Europe and the kings that they had there. Is this the same thing? Well, in Hebrew, of course, I think it's Melukah.
Melech Shemayim, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it has more to do with realm or rulership than actually kingdom. That's another carryover from King James English that we would do well to retranslate.
Yes, like a governance, if you will. Yes, and that's my point. So if we look at it, the construct being that there is the Father, which I guess in today's modern English, they would automatically make that be a religion per se, because now it's theistic and not just deistic or atheistic. And then you have, but other than that, then everything else is of a social construct nature and a civil construct nature. So everything else is divided into the rules on what you do and don't do to treat your fellow humans, and then the rules on the social rules, and then the monetary rules, the civil rules of what gets paid where and how things work out that way. They gave a certain amount to help the widows and the orphans, the poor. They gave a certain amount for different seasons and different things like that. So I was just trying to go into, because, when you think about it, we're just, think about your own conversion story. I was raised in church, in a Protestant church, but I had a conversion. Like, I felt like at some point that, hey, I want, and it was at a very young age. My parents were pastors, and so it was this thing that was brought on me earlier probably than most. But I remember thinking, I want to, quote unquote, follow Jesus. And that meant to me at that young age, I want to do what's right, which I think was good for me overall, because instead of just being an adult and hearing a creed or a prayer, believe that he was the Son of God, that he died, that he rose again, and that he's coming again. I think that, in my opinion, if that's all that you're attaching to the conversion, then I think that cheapens it. Whereas even though I didn't understand all of those concepts as a young kid, I understood that, hey, I'm making a decision to live right, obey my parents, and that was conversion to me. And all of this, kind of came to a point at believing in Jesus, if you will. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I kind of quantify it. Well, go ahead.
I was thinking that if you take, we know that he kept Torah with some exceptions. If you divorce the priestly portions of the Torah,
then he kept Torah.
Then what you have there is, especially for that time, a very equitable system,
right,
of checks and balances. Mm-hmm.
Yes, by far, out of the different contributors to the Tanakh, the priestly is the most hostile to the spirit of the Father, in my opinion. And so that's the point, is getting back down to that core. And I've read some different books on it, and different people have different ideas about what the core was and everything. And I've, read a book with a guy who actually lists out what he thinks it was, and it was very, very small. Not at all, nothing priestly in it, nothing in, hardly anything in it. But so then that goes to, we're born into this where we are, and I'm born in, the Americas in the 1970s, and that's what I've been given. But it takes you a while just to get on your feet and think straight and all this as a kid and teenager and an adult. And then once you start delving into stuff, you realize our view of the Father has to be so subjective, not only because we might be selfish or at the very least egotistical, but also because we've been given things that were done in his name, or we're told that they're from his lips, but then we've got to, if we're true followers, we've got to parse out and see if that's the truth. So, we are extreme Catholics. This is the way that Orthodox Christians look at us, is Protestants are extreme Catholics. They just have a problem with the Pope, basically. And they've got a problem with a few of the church's teachings, but they come through that Catholic line of thinking, that Western philosophical religious line of thinking. And that's true. And that's why, groups, different groups that we've been a part of, have tried to get to the Eastern way of thinking, the Hebraic way of thinking, the old, the first century Messianic way of thinking, or whatever it is. And I would argue that the Messiah then in the first century was trying to get to the original Torah way of thinking, which really strips away the priestly and the sacerdotal and just everything about that, and goes into the give yourself the true construct of the Father at the top, because then he's the one that is meting out justice and mercy, and he's also declaring what is okay and what is not. And then what is okay and what is not is very natural. There's nothing super spiritual about it. I mean, matter of fact, read some of these ancient Psalms, Psalms 15, where it says, who's the person who's going to inherit eternal life? And everything listed is a very natural thing. They treat their neighbor right. If they give their word, they do it even if it hurts. They don't charge usury with their money. Like, there's nothing religious about it at all. Zero religion in it. And so when you look at, this is easily seen when you look at a particular denomination or cult that you know to be false. And so then you see these people going through all of these motions and you think, man, that's just worthless. What are they doing? Yes, they have this attachment to the Father, but all of the religious motions are actually pushing them, keeping them further away from the Father than holding them to the Father, which is where we think the word religion, religare, comes from, and means to bind or to hold. And so we can see it in another cult or denomination that we don't belong to, but I want to take a step back even further and look at it as the whole construct and go, is the idea of religion as a whole. And again, from the definition of theism, we would probably still be considered to be religious, because we do believe in the Father and that he is actively involved in the world, which that's what separates theism from deism. But at that base point and his original instructions, and then we see that the Messiah came and all he was doing is saying, live like me, and I'm trying to show you the original instructions. At that point, there's nothing further. There's nothing religious about it. It's all social and civil.
Well, let me say concerning this. What are you, about 35?
I'm 44.
44. So you're older than I thought.
Thank you.
There is what comes over so many people who are going through the stage that you're obviously in the later stages of it here.
Sure.
Is that they later on in life, when they get to Erickson's 8th or 9th stage, they start seeking the religious patterns of their youth. So many people that have come into Hebrew roots are thinking, well, it's so dry and it's so dead and it's rules, and they're longing for that time when they practiced spiritual gifts, when they did sacraments, when they were in church, when they get older, for their own sake. Now, I'm not just saying this. I hear this all the time.
Yeah.
People get in, probably in their 60s or so. They go through this stage in their 50s when they become generative and more open to and more compassionate for others. And when they end up that stage longing for their youth again and for the religious things of their youth. And a second thing I wanted to mention is I think one of the problems with Scripture, if I dare criticize it, is that it explains Elohim in such anthropomorphic terms.
Yes.
Follow me?
Yes.
That now among our friends, we have all kinds of different concepts concerning how we can make God more human.
Right.
To the point where we not only have Trinity, we have, what would you call it, quaternity? We've got the sacred feminine in here, and God is splitting himself up into a family. And there are all these different pieces that existed from the beginning, to the point where you've got a Sephiroth, and you have then the Gnostic ideas of archons and all this stuff. That their supernaturality, I believe in it, and it's good. But there is a point where it goes so far as to transform the deity into person or persons, whereas, let me go back to Gnosticism, they continually say that the high deity is ineffable, indescribable, totally other. See what I'm saying?
Sure.
So what are we worshiping here? If we're making out our Elohim in anthropomorphic terms, we start worshiping a
Those,
friend of our own mind.
right, which I think is the beginning of the religious, is what I'm saying. And I think that Kifa in the recognitions says the same thing, in as much as he says we don't say anything more than the master told us, because once you do, you're not a sent one from the master. You are now on your own. You're doing your own thing.
Everybody should get into that book, because it is so practical. It seems like every conceivable religious practice is explained in ways that a person is understanding. It's earthy, and I can't say it's devoid of supernaturalism. It certainly is not. But everything is explained in a way that we can understand and bring it down to a more civil kind of community.
Yes.
So the idea of anthropomorphism, it happens with our cars. There are people who name their vehicles for one reason or another. Either they're being funny or there's some significance in the naming of the vehicle. So we try to make everything as human as possible. Of course, so right or wrong, it's something that seems to be innate in us, possibly. I would say though Yahweh is beyond all of our understanding. It would probably be a great idea if everybody stuck to what Kifa said, say what he said and nothing else. It would be real simple. Then you'd have to figure out what did he really say, and so on. And then we're kind of back down a possible rabbit hole that you could go down forever and ever and ever.
Well, yeah, but it also gets you back to the core of his message, right?
Well, it would, because you'd have to figure out, yes, what the core of his message is. Is it just don't kill people? I mean, some people would say it's just one commandment. He said it was two. Love Yahweh with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, of course, those two unfold or flower or blossom, or using the idea of programming, there are trees off of those that
he also talked about.
Yes, he did talk about them. That's true. But I'm just saying, you look at the Torah and see the trees kind of unfold there. It gets more detailed. You've got this whole idea in the oral law, I guess, or neighbor laws, and it's in Torah too, how you treat your neighbor, as you said earlier. But they're laid out very specifically, that you don't mistreat your enemy's ox, you don't mistreat your enemy's donkey, that you return a pledge back, and so on and so forth. Like you said, it's very plain, or it's very everyday type things. I think that we see religion's like a suit we put on. I've said this for a while. It's like a suit we put on, but for them, it was life. In the Middle East and such, you said, if Yahweh said it, I did it. I didn't think too much about the question of why, unless he told me, I would do it. Whether it was moral, supernatural, how it went, and I stand to be corrected or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that I would take it a step further, or take it in a different direction, and say that you can say that religion is a suit. I would say this. I would say that religion is majoring on the minors, or majoring on the ethereal instead of the mundane. But the mundane is where we live our lives. And what I mean by that is this. So if I turn on the radio right now and go to the Christian radio station, depending upon who I hit on, I'm going to hear, in a lot of ways, I'm going to hear a sermon promoting or defending a certain doctrinal point 8 times out of 10. Whereas it's very few people that week in and week out who are on the radio are talking about moral, ethical living as the major push thrust of their ministry. And maybe I'm just not listening to the right people. Not that I listen to them all the time, but anytime I go there, it's actually one of the reasons growing up, I didn't really, and I think I've got the right guy here. Growing up, he was not the same denomination as me, so I didn't hear him. But anytime I hear like a person like a Chuck Swindoll talking about moral living, and so I don't mind listening to him, even though I probably disagree with him on so many things. But because he keeps it in the mundane, which I would argue is what the Messiah and the Father through Moses said was spiritual living, is treating people correctly in the mundane arena. And so, but most people, it's bashing the Old Testament or talking about, how salvation works in the spiritual realm, and not even, using scriptures to launch, but then going into some, other kind of thing. There's so much of that out here. And then we have so many different camps that everybody feels like they've got to say it and defend themselves so that they don't lose people to the other guy or whatever it is. I don't know, what their motives are, but it then it turns into that, which is simply a mystic, religious, even a lot of times pagan, because of the paganism that pushes some of these doctrines. And these are going over, through the airwaves, and I know it sounds crazy for me to say this, but one of the people that's actually talking about treating your neighbor right, of all people, is the practically life coach Joel Osteen. Of all the things. No, I know. I'm not telling you to go listen to Joel Osteen, but what I'm saying is, like, he's got a sermon on you shouldn't eat pig because the Bible says you shouldn't eat pig and it's bad for you. And he goes, I know you're all going to go barbecue and eat pig, but you're not, it's bad for you. You're not supposed to do it. And I was like blown away. And he tells you to be nice. And now I get it, that his level of whatever he's doing is not going to get you anywhere. And I think it can be dangerous to stay there, but he's also not going, off the deep end about, if you don't speak in tongues, you're going to burn in hell forever or whatever.
Did you see the reaction to that sermon from his congregation?
No.
They began booing him.
Wow.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Y'all leave that Assembly of God preacher alone.
Oh, he's not Assemblies.
I think he's his own. He's his own.
He's non-denominational. But my point is this: is that I just think that there's a lot of religious stuff. Is exactly what the Messiah said, because you're preaching doctrines of men as though they were what the Father said, and that's what's happening. And I think that that's what ultimately these extra things that we feel like we need to have people do to protect the original words are a sin, and they blossom into religion that can lead people astray or push people out.
Well, fascinatingly, Rich, I think that there are people who also, they're not Christians, but they deal in moral law quite a bit, or the idea of treating people right.
Oh, absolutely.
You find that in Judaism, actually quite a lot, Rabbinic Judaism even. Now they have the oral law and the oral tradition, but so does the Orthodox Church. But they talk about this stuff. They have whole things about the neighbor laws. Of course, it's a magnification and amplification on what's in Torah, but what can be wrong with treating people better than better? If you can, if it says that you should, just giving a really ridiculous example, when you see somebody with that needs water, well, you give them 2 bottles of water at 50 cents. What's wrong with that? Of course, unless you don't have the 50 cents to give them all the 2 bottles of water. but it's the stress is on, or should be on, always helping, I guess, each other bear each other's burdens or carry their own burden even.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Well, Jack was talking about how when you get to, what was that called, Jack? When people get to a certain age.
Yes, second naivete.
And when they get to, like, let's say their 50s, their 60s, and they're grasping, did he say in that book what causes that? Why do people have a tendency to do that?
Well, it's a natural tendency, at least for, well, I think ubiquitously, but you can look it up. Just put second naivete in your search engine and you'll see a number of essays on this. I can't tell you any more, not much more about it. However, I think I did a podcast on it once.
I put it in the chat.
Okay, you found a link to it?
Just to the cycles. It just describes each cycle.
The reason why I bring that up and I ask that is I wonder, is it part of that scriptural term where it says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they won't depart from it? And is that one of those things where people are now starting to come back when they get into their 50s, 60s, and whatever, they're starting to come back to the root of what they've been taught? Or is it more they're reaching back for the religious of that time rather than the word of that time?
I think both, because look, as we get older and older, we are really regressing, if for no other reason than our brain's not working as well as it did, and we end up in a childish state. So perhaps what's happening there is that in the second naivete, that we are returning as well to our more childish notions or our earlier stage of faith that we felt so comfortable with. Now, let's see. I've got something else here, but I forgot right now. I have to see. I'm getting to that point myself. I had something else here on that stage of faith. Oh, Karl Barth. Maybe you've heard of him. One of the great theologians of the 20th century. Okay, he wrote scads and scads of books and commentaries and the whole lot. He goes into the second naivete and is asked later on in life, what is the most profound thing that you have discovered through all your studies? And he said, that's easy. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. That is a good indication, if he was serious, of somebody moving back in their stages of faith and experiencing a second naivete.
So then here's a good question, because there are things indicated that say we should be, like a child or have childlike faith. What does that mean in the context that Yeshua might have meant it? Because I've heard that the being like a child would mean that in the Middle East, children were of very low social value. Obviously, they were for the potential that they would grow up and be, givers and makers and builders and have and bear children. But in the children weren't the same thing as we see them as today.
Go to a third world country and see what parents think about their children. The children are the hope of the future. Say, for instance, let's talk about Haiti for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pastor ask me one time when I was touring, lecturing on Haiti, he said, why don't these parents use birth control? instead of they have nothing and they have 5, 6 children, don't they know any better? Can't you pass out prophylactics there? And I said, look, these people have the same hopes and desires as you, even if they live in a mud hut.
Right.
One of the greatest things in producing children that they hope for is that 1 or 2 of these kids can get a job in Orlando washing dishes, and so to help support them in their old age. I think it's the same way in the first century. Even though there was a more prosperous economy, the Romans were taking so much in taxes that people in their older age, when they couldn't work anymore, all they had to rely on was their children.
We also had extremely high infant mortality rates, which is
Yes.
something that would be unimaginable. You know, that, well, actually, it's not too long ago, I guess an extended human lifetime ago, that you would have had extreme infant mortality. You know, somebody, you have 10, 12, 14 children, because you know that 3 to 4 of them wouldn't make it. They would die before the age of 2,
Right.
just because of various things that, are now we take them for granted. We have, somebody could have 1 child and they will live to be 90. But, if you had, 14 children back then, you know that you might lose, 1, 2, 3, 4 or more. So you have that many, so that you would have the odds that one or some of them would survive.
Sure.
So, having childlike faith, though, the idea that, because there is, it says that, and maybe this is, whatever, but it says that if you ask anything of me, believing, then you will receive. And I'm sure that people have said, they've done that, and then they would say that they believed unquestioningly that it would happen, and it didn't. So, I guess I'm just asking, how do you have, is it the second naivete that Yahshua was talking about, or that we should somehow kind of hold on to that anything is possible for him? Nothing is too difficult for Yahweh. Is that the idea, you think, or am I just totally missing it?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think maybe it could be like just reading through this link I posted. It could be, going through maybe the a little bit later than the second stage, maybe the third or fourth stage or something, where you're kind of trying to copy the adults around you, it says, and so in the idea of just trusting in the leadership that's been given to you, which in this case is the Messiah, the Torah, and trying to emulate that would probably could be a good guess. Now, was that what he was talking about? I have no idea, but I could see that fitting in. But that's, of course, just subjectively, trying to answer your question.
Well, also, though, we do have a situation, though, with children where they do really believe the sky is the limit. That they're, they would, if you told him, or if you told children that, well, if you ask God for whatever, he will grant it to you if you believe it enough. They will believe you. Now obviously it comes, things might change with experience. And also they might find too that they're believing in the right things for the right reasons, then they do receive it. And also, I guess that would be another thing, are your reasons for wanting that particular blessing legit and proper? And does the Father see fit that that's true, that whatever it is you're wanting, whether it's, let's say $1 million, are you going to do right by it? Are you going to do right with it? I'm sorry, not by it. Whatever it is you say might be just what you say to, quote unquote, get what you want. But when you get it, what will happen?
I think that you've really got to be asking in the will. I know that there are people that ask for $1 million and expect $1 million, or in some cases, $100 million. But you don't get that because Yahweh knows that something like that would change your whole perspective, I think. I'm one that I think that I've gotten everything that I've asked for. Sometimes I've had to wait, but it's come to pass, often in miraculous ways. But I try to keep those petitions in the will of the Father insofar as I can find it. And I know that if I ask for millions of dollars, I wouldn't get it because I'm a prodigal. I would be a prodigal spender. That wouldn't be good for me.
Well, see, that's the thing, that knowing yourself as will probably give you a hint as to why certain things happen or don't happen. Because, you know, a lot of us would probably be like you, because if somebody said, hey, here's $5 million, you know, you think that, oh, I'll plan it out, I'll invest it, I'll do this, I'll do that. But then if it hits your hand, you know, a check or something like that, slap your hand and say, here, man, $5 million, go do what you will with it.
A new house, a new automobile, a new boat. Look at, for instance, Fitzpatrick there from the Brownsville Revival. When the money started flowing into him, what did he do?
He went profligate, huh?
Motorhomes. He did. Motorhomes, houses, all kinds of luxuries. Now, I feel that it's a lot that way with people today that are expecting huge profits from some small investment. And there's a lot of them. I just don't know if they would be following the will of Yahweh once they got them. I've heard some people say what they're going to buy with such things. And of course, a lot of it's good, but a lot of it is just frivolous stuff for self.
Well, that's the thing that you know, a lot of people would think about, you know, well, you talk about people who win the lottery. These guys win hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, and it's a nightmare for them.
That's right.
It is not a good thing because, of course, family that you didn't even know you had, for real and otherwise, will pop up and want money. They'll want to pay their debts. Or want you to pay their debts. They will, you know, before you know it, you will be outstripped and probably worse than when you began. You know, before you won the money, you'll be worse off. So, you know, there is all kinds of things. They tell you that you should have a psychologist, you should have a lawyer, you should have a financial advisor, or get these guys real quick after you win such
Right.
abundance, you know, such abundance in cash.
So what's the first thing you're going to buy if you win the lottery? You're going to buy a new house. You're going to buy a new car, a Lincoln Navigator or a Lamborghini or something like that. Then you're going to get the things that you want.
Right.
You're not going to stay in the same situation that you were in before. And you're right. This ruins people. Besides other people, flim-flam artists, con men coming out from everywhere to help you out.
But then what's worse is the legitimate people, you know, that need help, and you might want to help all of them. You know, we have a friend, Daniel and I, and she said, if I won the lottery, I'd give all the money to Israel. And we kind of just
tell her what I told her.
I said, that's precise. Yeah, Daniel said that's precisely why Yahweh doesn't give you the money.
He's going to give you just what you need, but never any over and abundance, because a foolish man and his money are always soon parted.
Unfortunately true.
I think that's a sound doctrine. I mean, we see that all the time.
Well, the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Ecclesiasticus, I guess, is to add in apocryphal book. They are pretty sound. It just works. They are maybe laws of nature that are expanded upon. You know, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child. You know, that sounds simple, but really, when you do not discipline somebody, they will grow up and think that what they're doing is right. and they will continue to do it. And then when somebody puts the beat down on them for something they've done in real life, you know, they're going to say, well, why did that happen? Because it was actually wrong what you did, and your parents spared that rod. And if they hadn't, you wouldn't have gotten in that trouble. You know, that's where, as Rich was saying earlier, that, you know, that's a very physical, natural thing. There's nothing spiritual about that. In essence, while it might lead to deeper spiritual things happening, good things, it is very, on the whole, right before your face in this world, in this realm. No doubt there is a spiritual realm, definitely, but a lot of what we need is here since we live here.
One of the things that I've learned when it comes to those types of things, and I used to do the same thing, and I used to say, oh man, if I could just win the lottery, imagine the good things that I could do. I could help so many people, and I could do so much. But then as I got older, I asked myself the question, okay, if you were going to win the lottery and do all those altruistic things you talked about, how come you didn't do them? The Father has blessed me with finances through a certain period of time. And sometimes the first thing we think, as soon as that money hits your hand, you go to spending. And you spend like a drunken sailor. And then you end up back in the cold saying the same thing. So like, if the Father blesses me, I know now to take care of his people. The money is not for me. That's not the kingdom economy. You get that money or you get something like that to be a blessing to other people. And so I had to learn that the hard way. And I do what I can now, but you know, you don't see me going out there, oh, if I could just win the lottery, the things that I could do, I don't do that anymore. Because I know that through my life, I had opportunity to do exactly what I was talking about, and I didn't do it. So the Father's going to give me just what I need. And maybe he might see fit to bless me, and I'll know what to do with it next time. So that's my thought.
All right. Anybody else got anything before we wrap up?
I'm sorry I came into the conversation late. But you know, one of the things that we see in human nature is that if we buy a new refrigerator and we know someone needs a refrigerator, we give them our old one. They work just fine. And then we keep the new one. And I often think that the reason why our blessings are held up is because we don't give that new refrigerator to the person that needed it. We always give them the second best or the leftover or, you know, just the hand-me-downs versus going out and helping somebody and giving them the new things and allowing Yahweh to bring you the things that are new or in better condition than what you have. So just an idea.
All right. Anyone else? All right, Jackson, you got anything, any announcements or anything?
No, just tabernacles, of course. We feasts.us, so the details for that. Primarily just announcing that for the sake of the podcast that's going to come out of here. We're going to have a great time. And we've got great teachers that are coming on too. So make your plans. This is going to be in a place where we're going to be able to see the colors of the trees changing. North Georgia, northwest Georgia. Beautiful area in the, let's see, what's the name of the mountains there? The Blue Ridge Mountains. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate everybody adding theirs to this. We kind of got off on a different topic, but that's what we're here for. So we'll see you
Shabbat
next.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. We'll see you next week at this time.